Hello Excel friends, in this Excel video we're going to learn how to use some of Excel's more advanced formatting features. So we'll start off with a minimally formatted worksheet, one that we've worked with before, and we'll learn how to format it like this. We'll learn how to customize formatting to our liking starting from scratch, and we'll learn how to use some of Excel's built-in formatting shortcuts. Now we'll also learn how to easily take formatting that we set up for one worksheet and reuse it on other worksheets with just the click of a mouse. And after this, hopefully you'll view your Excel skills as a truly beautiful thing. Let's learn! I have a starter worksheet that we can use. It's basically the worksheet where we left off at the end of one of our prior learning videos, the one with Inditext, H&M, and Zara financial data. And you can download this starter worksheet from the Google Drive at bit.ly/excel-starter-files. Those are all lowercase letters. And you'll see a bunch of files in here. You want to find the one that's labeled More Formatting-Starter File. Just right-click on that, select Download. Make sure that you save this to a location that you'll recognize. I'm going to save mine to the Excel Book Exercises folder, which is right here on my desktop. And since I'm using Chrome shows me the download progress and an icon in the lower left-hand corner of my browser. And when it's done downloading, I can just double-click this icon to open the file in Excel. If your browser doesn't work this way, just find the file that you downloaded, make sure it's in the location you're expecting, otherwise move it there, and then double-click to open it up in Excel and get started. So you can explore these different worksheets if you want. Click on the H&M tab, the Gap tab. You'll see that it's essentially the same format, but with different data and different currency formatting for these three different companies. So let's return to the Inditext tab, and let's first save this file so that it's no longer called starter file. So on the Mac, I'm going to go up under File, Save As. On Windows, you can click on the File tab and then select Save As. But I'm just going to rename this More Formatting. I don't have the -starter at the end of it. And I'll be sure that I'm saving this to a location where I can remember where it is. For me, it's just going to be inside of my Excel Book Exercises folder. Now first, I'm going to move the stock symbol information from A2 down to A3. And you could do this in a bunch of different ways. You could select it in A2, use the Cut command, and then paste it into A3. But I'm going to use the mouse and I'll use Excel's Select and Drag feature. So I'm already in cell A2. That's the selected cell. And remember, the cursor changes shape based on the context of what you can do. So the drag to move is possible when the cursor looks like a white glove, sort of like the kind of gloves Mickey Mouse wears. And this will show up if you move your cursor over the edge of the current selection. So I'll move to the bottom of A2, and I see the Mickey Mouse glove. I'm going to hold down the cursor, and while holding down the cursor, I'll just drag it to its new location. That's going to be A3. I'm going to let go, and I've just moved it. Now you can also do this with a selection of cells. So why don't we take A3 and A4, I'll highlight those two cells. I'll move to the top border of the selection until I see the Mickey Mouse glove. Click, hold down the mouse, and I'm going to drag, and I'm going to release in cell A13. Yeah, it's a super easy technique. Also be aware though, if you drag on top of a cell that contains data, the data in the cells you're dragging onto will be replaced by whatever you drag on top of them. So now I don't need row 3 and 4 anymore, so I'm going to click on the 3, drag to 4, right click and select delete, and those rows are gone. And since the data in A11 and A12 are just sort of footnotes, they're not the main financial data, I'd like to make these smaller. So I'm going to highlight A11 and A12 so I can format both of these cells at the same time. And I'm going to click on the B for bold. Clicking it once makes both cells bold. Clicking it a second time toggles to remove bold from both cells. Then I'll click on the font pull-down menu. Now I'm going to select the Calibri font, which you should have. It's a Microsoft font that should have been installed with Excel. But if you don't see it on your computer, feel free to select another one that looks similar. I'm going to find Calibri and I'm going to select that. And as I do, I can see a bunch of additional styles off here to the right. I'm going to select the light style, and then I'll click the I to italicize the selection. Now there was a light italics option in the font menu, but there are always lots of different ways to get things done in Excel. And I'll pull down on the font point size menu and select 8. And I think that's getting closer to the footnotes look that I want. And now on to some new stuff. Now I want to center the name of the company, which is in cell A1, and I'd like to make it nice and big and center it inside this selection from A1 through D2. So make sure you click first in A1, then drag to select through D2. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to merge all of these cells together so they're one big cell. And I can do that by clicking on Merge and Center here, right in the Home ribbon. And when we see that, we see what was in A1 is now spread across all of these cells, and all the cells that were in that selection A1 through D2 are now being treated as a single cell. And since I clicked Merge and Center, not only did I merge those cells together, I took the contents of what was in cell A1 and I've centered it across this new monster-sized single merged cell. Now let's verify A1 is one big cell. So let's make sure that we've clicked in cell A1, and we can see it says A1 in the name box in the upper left-hand corner. Let's press the down arrow once and we go right from A1 down to A3. Now press the up arrow on your keyboard and you go from A3 back to A1. Press the right arrow and we go from A1 to E2. Whoa! Then we can left arrow back and we're back in cell A1. Now notice when I'm in cell A1, I can see that merge and center is still highlighted in here, but this acts like a toggle. If I click it again, I remove the merge and center, and I see all the cells in that original range from A1 to D2 come back. Now, if you click on the arrow next to merge and center, you'll see that there are a bunch of related options that you can select. So let's try these out one by one. Make sure that you've still selected the range from A1 through D2, and we'll select merge across. Now this merges the columns into a single cell, so this merge happens across or horizontally, but it doesn't happen vertically. So now we have two cells, A1 and A2, that occupy the space from column A through column D. And if we click on A1 and then use the down arrow, we see that we've got an A2 here. We didn't have that cell before. Down arrow again, we're A3, we can go back, and now I'm going to undo the merge across that I just did. Again, you can do this with the keyboard shortcut Command-Z on the Mac, Control-Z on Windows. You should have that memorized by now. And let's keep the selection from A1 through D2, and I'm going to select Merge Cells. Now this just creates that one monster cell named A1 that takes up the space from the range that used to be A1 through D2. It just doesn't center the contents. Now the default for Excel is to left justify text and to bottom justify it too. That's why we see this text sort of hugging the lower left-hand corner of this big cell. I'm going to undo again, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to select merge and center. And in addition to typing the undo keyboard shortcut, you can also select unmerge cells. Now this only removes the merge. The text is still centered in A1, but I'm going to go back to merge and center, and I'd like the name of the firm to be vertically centered as well. So I'm going to click on this icon just above the center align icon that we'd used previously. This one here is the middle align icon, and it middle aligns the contents of the cell vertically. The one below it does it horizontally. And the name of the firm is nicely centered across the newly merged cell. Looking good. And it looks like the contents of cell D3 profit margin is just creeping a little bit out to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click in between D and E to auto fit column D's column width. And now let's make things a little bit more colorful. So I'm going to click into cell A1, this big merged cell that I created, and I'm going to move my cursor to this icon that looks like a paint bucket. This is the fill color icon, and it sets the background color of a cell. Now this usually shows the last color that was used as a fill color, and if you haven't used it before, it's probably showing this highlight yellow color, but you can change it to any color you want just by clicking on the downward pointing arrow to the right of the paint bucket. Let's do that now, and we'll expose the color picker. Now you see a bunch of colors in here. Along the bottom are the standard colors. I'm going to select the medium blue, which is third from the right in this list of standard colors, and our selected cell now has a nice blue background. Now the icon just to the right of the paint bucket looks like the letter A with an underline, and that's the icon to set the font color. And the default is red, but you can change the font color, and when you do, the underline will be in the last font color that was used. Now, we don't want to use red, so what we're going to do is click on the downward pointing arrow next to the font color icon. This lets us select a color. Let's select white, and now our cell is formatted with white text and a blue background. Very stylish. Now, the built-in colors are cool, but you might want to customize your colors to perfectly match the color scheme used by your firm or its logo. So why don't we give custom colors a shot? I'm going to undo twice so that I go back to my black text on a white background. And in order to show custom colors, why don't we set the color scheme for this cell to be the same as our university colors? So why don't you open your web browser, go to your university's webpage. I'm going to assume that this page shows your university's official colors somewhere in there. Then I'm going to return to Excel, and I'm going to click and drag in the edge so that I resize the window so that it's a bit smaller and so that I can see my university's webpage in the background. Now, my colors are maroon and gold, so I'm going to set the background to maroon and the text color to gold. So I'm going to click on the down arrow next to my paint bucket icon. That's the color fill icon. Now, Windows users might see the eyedropper as a selection right away. If so, you can just click the eyedropper while Mac users catch up. Mac users have to dig a bit, but it's pretty easy to find. Just click on More Colors. The standard Mac color picker shows up, and let's click on the colored pencil icon in the upper right-hand corner of the color picker. My Mac is already showing the colored pencils by default, and we see a bunch of different colored pencils, but if you take a look in the lower left-hand corner, there's where your eyedropper is. So on either platform, click on that eyedropper icon, and you'll see the circle surrounding your cursor will be magnified so that you can zoom right in on a particular color. And it will allow you to click on any color that you want to use. So I'm going to move my cursor up to the maroon on the web page that's lingering just in the back of my Excel window. And when I click that, I can see the color selection that I just made to the left of the eyedropper. Again, it might look slightly different under Windows, but if I click on OK, I've just set the cell's background color to Boston College Maroon. Now, the last font color that I used was white. That's why there's a white underline underneath the A here. And when I click on that, I can see my font color changes to white. But I can also click on this pull-down menu and follow that same procedure for Mac or Windows to find and select the eyedropper. And I'm going to head up here and I'm going to click on Boston College Gold. Then I'll click OK, and my text color is now gold. And so now I'll re-expand my Excel window by double-clicking in the window title bar, and I'm going to show you some additional formatting techniques in cell A1, so I'm going to press undo 3 times to get back to black text with a white background. Now we can also change the font in the selected cells. You can also go right up here to the font menu, and if you pull down, you see all of the different font types. I'm going to try the copperplate font, which is kind of neat. It's got all capital letters, but the lowercase letters just look like smaller versions of the capital letters. If you don't have copperplate, choose whichever one you want. Another pro tip, if you start to type the name of the font, your selection will jump to whatever you type. So I've started to type copperplate and I jump right to the selection up top. I've already used that before, so that's why it's under recent fonts. I'll select bold. We see the font is changed, and I'm going to press the increase font icon 3 times, and that'll increase the font size to 18 points. Now Excel also has some pre-made cell formats that you can leverage to save yourself some design time and to help those that may be more aesthetically challenged like myself. So on the home ribbon, you can click on the down arrow next to the cell styles icon that you see here. And this exposes a whole host of cell styles. You can explore these more on your own, but for now, I'm just going to select this option under themed cell styles that says accent number 1. It's got a blue background with white text, sort of like what I had before, and that sets the style for the selection with just one click. Now notice it undoes the font selection and size that I had previously made, but you can reset this. So I'm going to go back up to the font menu. I'm going to select copperplate bold again, and I'll click the increase size button a couple of times to set it to 16 points. Now, once you've set up some Excel formatting, it's pretty easy to reuse this format in other locations. And to do this, just click on the Format Painter on the home ribbon. Now, that's this icon that looks like a paintbrush, and that copies the format from the current selection. So what I've done is I've copied the format from cell A1. That's my current selection. You see the marching ants circling the selection that I just copied this format from. The paintbrush icon on the ribbon here is highlighted so that you know that the Format Painter is on, and your cursor has a paintbrush in the lower right. Now the next selection that you make is going to paint the format that you just copied from that selection. So why don't we head over to the H&M tab, and with our Format Painter still on, we can tell because it still looks like a paintbrush. And let's click in cell A1 in the H&M worksheet, and whoa! We can see all of the formatting copied over from a previous worksheet into this cell. The merge and center occurred, the background color changed, the font color changed, the font size changed, even the middle justify was made. And if I click in the cell and use my arrow key to move around, I can see that the range A1 through D2 in the worksheet has now merged into one big A1 cell. Now if I go under the Merge and Center pull down on the home ribbon and select Unmerge Cells, I can see that it puts back the stock symbol that was in A2. Now this looks a little weird, and the cells in A1 and A2, all of the data is there, it's just that they're centered. So when we unmerged, we originally merged and centered, we still have the center in there for cell A1 and A2. That's why you only see half of what's inside of the cell. Everything is there, it's just that the left half of what's in there is spilling off to the left where it can't be seen. Now it's not usually the case where you get back what was covered up from merging cells. So for example, with A1 through D2 still selected, I can click on Merge and Center again, and Excel gives me this warning. It says that the merged cells will only keep the upper left value, it discards the rest, so I'll select OK. So just be aware that if you merge cells, you can lose any data beneath them in the cells that aren't part of the first selection. So I'm going to undo this a couple of times so that I go back to where I was before I clicked on the Paint Formatter. Then I'll return to the Inditex tab, and the way the Format Painter works is you make one click on the Format Painter icon. This copies the selected format, and then when you click again, you paste the format into your selection and you're done. Now it is possible to keep the cursor in Format Painter mode and make multiple selections, painting the selected format with each click. And to do that, all you need to do is click on this Format Painter icon twice in a row. So I'm going to do that right now, and this temporarily locks the cursor in Format Painter mode. And when I return to the H&M worksheet, I can click in A1, so I've just pasted the format in H&M, and notice my cursor is still the paintbrush. That means the Format Painter is still active, so now I can click back over on the Gap worksheet and click in A1 here, and I can keep painting that format wherever I click. Now we know the Paint Formatter is still active because the icon is grayed out over here in the home ribbon, but if I click that icon again, the highlighting goes away, I've deactivated the Format Painter, and my cursor's back to normal. Now I'm going to press Command-Z to undo the formatting that I just pasted into the Gap worksheet. I'll Command-Z again. Notice that that performs an undo on the H&M worksheet, and any undo that you perform will undo the prior command that you used. So it's not just limited to the worksheet that you're working on, it actually undoes whatever the Excel commands were. This works across multiple worksheets and even across multiple documents. So I'll undo one more time. This brings me back to the Inditex worksheet, and I also want to point out that you do want to make sure that the format that you're painting painting makes sense when applied to any new cells. So I'm going to show you where it doesn't make much sense. So I'm in the Inditex worksheet now. Cell A1 is highlighted. I'm going to click on the Format Painter. It copies all of the formatting in this large merged cell. But if I go down here and drag from A4 through A9, wow, this looks really terrible. And that's because I've got merged cells happening in here. I'm losing data in some of the cells underneath where I merged them. I'm centering some things. I'm converting date formats to meaningless number formats. This is not at all what I want. So I'm going to undo this. Much better. And remember, if I don't like any of the formatting that I've set up, I can go up here to the Clear Format option under the Home tab to get rid of all of my formatting. So with A1 selected, I'm going to go up under the Clear Icons pull-down menu. I'm going to select Clear Formats. All the formats go away. I just wanted to show you that you could do that. I'm going to undo that again to keep the format that I had. And now we're fairly armed with formats for adding, removing formats, copying formats using the Format Painter. But Excel also has some really nifty built-in formats that can apply a bunch of different cell styles across a selection of cells that are organized in a tabular row column format. So they'll do things like highlight a group of headers one way, a group of data cells another way, but use a unified color scheme. So let's do that with the data in cell A3 through D9. So let's first select that cell range. Now, this data is already set up so that it's ready to be converted into a table. That's because it has headers in this top row. And then under that, we see that there's a row for each of the items that we're keeping track of. So this is quarterly data, and we'll format all of these rows at once using a predefined table format. And to do that, we're going to use Excel's Format as Table option. Now, Excel's Table feature offers some additional functionality. In a future video, we'll show what that functionality is, but right now we're just going to use Format Table as formatting, and then we're going to remove the table features. So for now, let's go up to this Format as Table icon that's on the Home ribbon. Click the down arrow, which shows a whole bunch of pre-formatted table styles. Very cool. Now I'm going to select this style here. If I hover the cursor over it, a tooltip reveals its name, and it's not a very friendly name. It's Blue Table Style Light 9, but you can see that it's showing a reduced version of what we're going to get. So we see a blue header row with white text. We see the data rows below this that have a white background and black text, and they're separated by light blue lines. So let's click this and see what we get. And Excel prompts us with another dialog box asking us to confirm the location of the data in the table. If we hadn't selected the correct range, we could change it here, but our range selection is correct. We also have My Table Has Header clicked. That's correct because row 3 is our header row. It doesn't contain any numbers. So let's click OK. And wow, all of these cell formats are applied and our table looks very professional. And you might also notice that we're no longer in the Home ribbon. Excel dropped us into a new ribbon, the Table ribbon, and that's because our selection is inside of an Excel table, and there's all sorts of special functionality in this ribbon that is specific to Excel tables. Now, just to give you a sneak peek of Excel tables, you'll notice that there are downward pointing arrows in each of the column headers, and if you click on one of these arrows, like I'm about to do in the profit margin header cell, this brings up a dialog box where you can sort in ascending or descending order. You can also use this to filter your data. Now, this is all pretty powerful, but we're going to table our discussion of tables for now. See what I did there? And in fact, we're going to disable the table features and just keep the cool formatting that we've just applied. So I'll close this dialog box, and with our table tab selected, we're now showing this table ribbon. I'm going to go up here to get rid of the table feature by clicking on the button that says Convert to Range. And once I do that, Excel asks me to confirm that I want to convert the table to a normal range. I'll select yes. Then those downward pointing arrows in the headers go away. I'm no longer in the table ribbon. I'm back in the Home ribbon. I don't have access to the table features that we will learn about in a future video lesson, but we do get to keep the cool formatting. Now let's learn a bit more about formatting the look of our worksheets. So you might have seen some worksheets that don't have grid lines between cells. Now usually this is just used when you're preparing a worksheet for a presentation, but we can get rid of those grid lines if you'd like, and we can do this by clicking on the View tab. This brings up the View ribbon, and then just click off the checkbox that says Grid Lines, and the lines between cells go away. Now, the reason why you're seeing an underline under each table view row is there is a separate blue border line added to each of these cells. So let's learn how to work with cell borders. So we'll head back to the Home ribbon, and first let's add some borders around cell A11, the cell that contains the stock symbol, so we can learn a bit more about how cell borders work. Now up here on the Home ribbon, just to the left of the paint bucket fill color icon, there's a border selection tool. Now it usually shows these 4 boxes that represent 4 cells in a possible selection. Now in my icon, there's a thicker line along the bottom, and that's because the last border that I applied was the underline border. Now, if you click the down arrow next to this icon, you'll see all sorts of possible border selections. The 4 squares that you see next to each selection show you how each border would be applied to a selection of cells. So if I select the bottom border here, we've just added a bottom border to cell A11. Now you can't really see it because the standard highlighting for the cell looks like the bottom border, but if you click off the cell, you can now see the cell without the highlighting. And indeed, it does have an underline border. Cool. So now let's click back on cell A11 and we can select a new border. How about all borders? This one here will put borders around each of the 4 sides of all cells in a selection. We've only got one cell selected, but if we make this selection and then click off to the right, it doesn't look like this was applied. But that's just because the contents of A11 spills over the right side of the cell and it'll hide any border that's in the cell. So that means the contents of the cell is displayed over the top of any border. But if I click between the A and B columns and drag to the right to make more room in the cell, I can now see that the right border shows up. Now what about the left border? Well, it's here too. You just can't see it because the cell is flush with the left side of the worksheet. Want to see all the border formatting in A11? Let's highlight a range in the worksheet that contains all of the cells with all of the values and move the entire selection to the right and down a little bit. I'm going to click in D12 and drag to select through A1. Then with this selected, I can move my cursor over any of the edges and turn it into the Mickey Mouse glove. So with the Mickey Mouse glove selected in the upper right hand corner, I'm going to hold my mouse down and drag over, releasing so that the cell that used to be in A1 is now in C3. Cool. I've just slid over all of this selected data. Now if I click off the selection, I can see the borders are indeed around cell C13, which used to be cell A11. Want to get rid of the borders? Let's now click back on C13, that bordered cell, pull down the menu next to our border icon, select no borders, click off the cell, and we see the borders have gone away. So let's run through a few more of the options with borders so you can get a sense of how they work. Why don't we put a double underline underneath C3? So let's click back on cell C3 and we'll pull down the options to select borders and let's apply the double bottom border here and we'll click off that cell and we see a nice dividing border underneath the merged cell. Now let's put a border around all of our data. We can select from C3 through F14 and we'll go under the border option and we'll select the option that says outside borders. We'll click outside of our selection and we see we have a nice border around the edge of the selection, but not inside. Now let's contrast this with all borders. So if we select again from C3 through F14, we find and select all borders. This puts grid lines around every border of every single cell in our selection. Not really what we want, but now you know what that does. So let's undo this. And if we want a thicker border, you can just select your range and then select thick box border. Then let's click to the side. This looks even nicer. Let's keep this. Now what about these blue underlines that we got from the Excel table format? Well, if we'd like to remove the blue underline, we've got a few options. One is that we can erase these borders individually. And to do that, we can select all of the cells from C6 through F14. That's all the cells that have the bottom blue borders. And we can select this option under the border selection that says Erase Border. Now this will switch the worksheet from data entry to erase border mode. Your cursor looks like a little eraser, and each time you click on a border, you erase that border. Well, this is a cool and useful tool, but there's a more efficient way to do this. I'm just going to go up here and select no border. Now I've still got my selection from C6 through F14, and Excel removes all of the borders in that range. Now if I click off of the selection, I can see I'm almost there, but I've lost the outside box border between the B and C and the F and G columns, but we know how to add this again. Just select the entire range from C3 to F14, and once again we can select thick box border, and we've filled out our full box border all around this selection. Let's add a few more flourishes. Let's select the range for our last quarter, April 2020, and we'll add a bottom double border to separate our quarters from our total. This looks sharp. Let's do something similar with the average row, so we'll highlight this range, and why don't we select bottom border here? That gives us a single line, looking good. Now we don't need this blank line in row 12, so we can just select row 12 and delete this. And why don't we move our footnotes so that they're right justified instead of left justified? There are lots of different ways to do this, but why don't we select from C12 through F13, and under the Merge and Center pull down, we'll select Merge Across. And we can click the icon to right justify these cells, and if we want to decrease the height in the footnote cells, we can just select the rows from 12 and 13, and just click in between the 12 and 13 and drag up, and both rows will shrink to the row height that we release at. Well, now we've got a pretty professional looking worksheet. Now this worksheet just needs a few more touches. We can double click on the column letters to auto fit the column width, And let's highlight the headers for revenue, income, and profit margin and right justify those. Now they're aligned just like the numbers below them. Now wouldn't it be great if we could grab all the formatting that we just did and apply it to the other worksheets? Well, we can. We've already shown how we can with a single click copy the format with a format painter and click in a new cell to paste in all of that formatting. Now I'll undo that. We did it cell by cell, but let's try this instead. Let's highlight all of the cells where we added formatting on the Inditext worksheet, click on the format painter, then head to H&M, then click on cell A1 to paint all of this formatting, and it almost works, but the headers aren't in the right place. The formatting is all wrong on the last two quarters. Total and average show right justified values. The numbers seem to have been removed because there's some sort of cell merging happening here, and the footnote cells aren't showing at all. Well, we're on the right track. The problem is the data that we're pasting the format into doesn't match the original, but we can fix that. Let's undo the formatting that we just added, and now let's move the stock symbol and the currency symbol below the average line. We can go back and delete rows 3 and 4, and now the data looks just like the Inditext data did before we started adding the formatting. So we can head back to the Inditext worksheet, we can select C3 through F13, we can click on Format Painter, head back to H&M, and with a single click in A1, look at that! All the format from the Inditext worksheet pastes into the H&M data. All the formatting is repeated with just one click. Now the auto-fit column width doesn't carry over, but we can just double click between D and E to fix that. And it also carried over the euro formatting. We don't want that, but we know how to fix it. Just select all the values that hold the euro currency. Then we can head to the number formatter pull down up here, select more number formats. The selected category is already currency. Select symbol, and remember the shortcut to jump right to SEK Swedish krona. We just type SEK. There we have it. We can click OK, and this looks perfect. Now let's move our worksheet data so that it starts in cell C3, just like our Inditext data. When we try this, we're going to run into a problem. And this is a problem I've seen trip up a lot of students in the past. And Excel doesn't give you a very understandable error when this occurs. But what we'll do to try to understand the problem is we'll take a look at the error, then I'll show you the workaround, we'll perform the workaround together, and hopefully it'll be clear how you can work around this problem if you ever encounter it in the future. So let's first highlight A1 through D11, and we'll find the Mickey Mouse glove. We'll drag this data so that the first cell is C3. We'll let go, and Excel won't let us do this. It gives us an error, and the error says we can't do that to a merged cell. Now I love that Excel says we. I don't know if that means me and you, Excel, or if Excel refers to itself in the plural like the royal we, but I do wish the error were a little more clear. Now the problem is we're trying to take data from regular cells and drag them on top of merged cells. And this happens when we drag data over what used to be the merged cells from A10 through D11. Those are the cells that held our footnote data. Now Excel can't deal with that. It doesn't know how to reconcile the mismatch of cells. You can put merged cells on top of non-merged cells, but if you try to put non-merged cells onto merged cells, Excel will give you this error. So how do we fix it? Well, first, let's click OK to get rid of the error dialog. Then I'm going to shrink down my screen so that you can see what I'm doing. Now, I'm going to take my Mickey Mouse glove, and I'm going to drag the entire selection of data way beyond where I want to eventually place it. And now when I do this, all of the cells that are going to be my eventual destination of this data are now standard non-merged cells. So if I click the Mickey Mouse hand and I drag back and I let go on C3, I'm no longer trying to place non-merged cells into merged cells, since all of these cells where I'm dropping this are non-merged cells, so when I let go, we don't have the problem anymore. So if you encounter this, one way to solve this is just drag your data way outside where you eventually want to drop it, so that all the cells at the eventual destination for the data will be non-merged cells. Then you can drag the data back over those non-merged cells and they nestle into the new location without complaint. Now I'll zoom this worksheet at 200% so it's zoomed at the same level as the other worksheets, and I'll double click between F and G to auto-fit the profit margin column, and the next steps are all for you to do on your own. What I want you to do is to copy all of the formatting that we apply to the Inditext worksheet, apply it to the Gap worksheet, use the same techniques that we just used with H&M, make sure Gap is valued in US dollars, make sure that you move this data so that it starts at cell C3, auto-fit all of the columns properly as well. Now if we go back to H&M, this worksheet still doesn't look like the exact format of the Inditext worksheet. What I need you to do is to remove the grid lines both from H&M and Gap as well, then save your worksheet and your instructor may have additional instructions for submitting this for credit. So once again, we've covered a ton of new topics. We learned how to move by dragging, how to change fonts, font styles, and font sizes, how to work with merged cells, merge and center, plus related commands. We learned to use vertical alignment in cells, color fill, font color, how to select custom colors, how to use Excel's built-in cell styles, how to use the Format Painter on cells and selections, format as table for formatting, how to remove the table feature using convert to range. We removed grid lines, and we worked with cell borders and selection borders. I hope your day is as picture perfect as your new Excel skills, and always be excellent to each other.